So what you're asking about is artificial general intelligence.
Yes. Yeah, I was leading up to that as well. Yeah.
So artificial general intelligence is one that is automatically able to figure out something that it has come up with, um, how accurate or how correct it is,
Hmm.
irrespective of whether it has seen that in its training data. In
Hmm.
fact, if like if it hasn't seen that in the training data and it has come up with that, that's a pretty good approximation of like this thing is intelligence, right?
Hmm.
So one way that artificial intelligence researchers think about what is a test to give an AGI to check whether it is an AGI or not is, in the training data, remove all mentions of the word consciousness. So this is quite human taxing. Like it takes like a lot of effort, but like make sure that the word consciousness is not there. Maybe even go one step further. We're not talking about feasibility, okay? Hypothetically, if we could do this, scrape out all the mentions even of the idea of consciousness.
Hmm.
Okay, so level one is remove all mentions of the word consciousness. Level two is
Hmm.
remove all the mentions of the concept also.
Okay.
Okay,
So it
and
can't
then
conceive of it.
it can't conceive of it, and then like do the training like you normally do, and then
Yeah.
on the other side see if it comes up with the idea of consciousness by itself.
Right.
If it is able to, that is pretty interesting, that it was able to like hallucinate something that um,
Hmm.
is what we would call true, right?
Right.
But see, the question that you've asked is a speculative question. None of us
Right.
are going to know without like actually AGI coming up. Different people who are way more educated than me have may have like different ideas. Um, but in my opinion, um, how question is how can you get an AI to automatically understand the value of its own prediction? See, if you take the words A, B, C, D to Z,
Hmm.
okay, they can be combined in literally trillions of ways.
Hmm.
It's just that we as humans have collectively decided that certain configurations make sense and certain don't, right? Like
Hmm.
B, BAT is bat,
Right.
AAT is nothing.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The words BAT is bat, which is like a cricket bat, like a
Right. Right. I get
something
it. I
that you
get it.
hit people, take a baseball bat. But AAT is nothing. Why?
Hmm.
That's completely arbitrary. Why is bat meaning that and AAT meaning nothing? It's
Hmm.
because we as humans have collectively agreed that BAT means something and AAT means nothing.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So going forward also, as an AI, the AI is capable, you can think of the AI as being capable of coming up with every combination of a word by using A to Z. Okay?
Right.
How would it know which combinations are useful and which ones are not?
Hmm.
It's not. It requires a human to tell it what combinations are useful and what ones are not, because ultimately it is the humans that are training this AI, and it is humans who the AI needs to be helpful for. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not to say that for every single thing a human is required, because if that is the case, then there's no point of artificial intelligence, right? Like for
Hmm.
everything. So
Hmm.
what the artificial intelligence has been trained on right now is it has been given like lots of valid combinations. And the interesting thing is If you take those valid combinations and you break them down into smaller pieces, the smallest pieces, and then you combine them up in different ways, it still is valid. For
Right.
example, let's take the word defect, okay? And let's break it down into its subparts. So one part is D, as in DE, and the other part is fect. You could probably even like break the word fect down into smaller parts, but
Mm.
let's not do that for now. Let's just take the word D.
Mm-hmm.
Defect is a word, detest is a word,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Demystify is a word.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the same component mixed with another valid component that is leading to another new word that is also valid, right?
Right.
So by already giving it valid words or valid combinations and teaching the artificial neural net to automatically understand how to break these down into smaller pieces,
Right.
it is able to figure out like, okay, by breaking them down into these pieces, by combining them up, what you come up with is still valid.
Mm.
So it's like already doing this to a certain extent where it is predicting the quality of its own output. But if it comes up with something that it has never seen before, then you require a human to go in, analyze that, and tell it, yeah, actually, this thing that you've come up with is really interesting. This thing is not. So you could think
Right.
of uh, an intelligence as like a simulator of all possibilities. So it can
Right.
simulate all possibilities, and in all of the possibilities, some really interesting possibilities live and reside. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the possibilities are, um, I wouldn't say pointless, but they're like they aren't meaningful. They're meaningless possibilities.
Right. Yeah, like I think an interesting like a tangent to this is it's like when the more you read, sometimes you find like pieces of information that you think are relevant but aren't actually relevant to the given like thing you're trying to actually solve, and you might use it to overthink things, or it'll screw up your weightages of how you're judging the
Yeah,
situation,
but that is
and
learning.
that's learning. Mm.
So, like, if you read 20 books, then a thought that you have after that is a logical prediction based on using the context of all of the books that you have read. And you may not remember
Right.
everything in a book, but you remember the central ideas, right? But those
Hmm.
become like the context that you use to formulate the next thought. So that's learning.
Right. Okay, that's actually fascinating. Like because in so many instances, um, you at AI can feel so real in that, but when you look at under the hood, it's just the simplicity of it is kind of beautiful in a way. Like the weightages of it. Maybe I'm just like being a bit reductive here as well, but I'm just when I visualize that, and but what we can do with that simplicity is also astounding. Like
It is
its
right.
ability to like imagine, like I've done it where I've just tried to come up with, let's say if it's two parties, I ask it to come up with an argument and to defend this, and then the complete opposite argument for this. It can do it so freaking well,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yes.
like and yet it's not the sentience we're looking for. It still bases off of human intelligence to the way we've
Yeah.
confirmed or denied. It's
Yeah. But that
fascinating.
intelligence, the way we decide so the first point that you made about it being if you are able to reduce it down to like what a neuron does, like an artificial neuron, it doesn't seem as complicated, right?
Yeah.
It seems almost
Yeah.
simplistic.
Yeah.
But if you do that same thing and you go down the biological rabbit hole to like
Mm.
what a neuron does, more sophisticated, but they do very similar things. Like
Mm.
insanely more sophisticated in the terms of like the complexity that it is able to muster, but like it does the same thing.
Mm.
And the thing about biology and all of these things is, it's like one way of looking at it is it's like a magician revealing their trick, or like a joke being explained. A lot of people think like when you do that, either the joke loses its humor or the
Mm.
magic trick loses its magic.
Hmm.
But what I have found, and that's a very logical and fair thing to think because that's actually true, right? Like when a magician reveals his trick, like the
Yeah.
awe of it goes away. But with
Right.
biology and neurons and all of this, I found it to be the opposite, where like the more you peel away, the more you reduce it down to its absolute first principles, the more you're blown away by how those first principles coming together leads to something as complex as us, as complex as like an
Mm.
artificial intelligence that can reason both sides of an argument.
Mm.
So like it is like ultimately like
It's
the
like the
only way we can
transistor all
comprehend.
over again.
Yes, yeah. But
Yeah.
ultimately, like the human brain has to
Mm.
reduce to understand. Like we
Right.
cannot, I don't think we can comprehend the continuous. I think it is possible. Maybe like the people who have spent a lot of time um, being spiritual, like doing meditation and all of that, and like really pursued this like with great honesty. I
Hmm.
think they are able to perceive the continuous. But
Mm.
most of us are able to perceive the world reductively. Like we have to reduce things down to smaller
Mm.
pieces to understand it. Some people are
Right.
able to reduce it down to the level of atoms. Some people are able to reduce, like are not able to reduce it down to that level, but they're able to reduce it down to like some other aspect. So whatever you're training it.
Mm.
So for example, you're a designer, right? You probably reduce things down to like their proportions, their symmetry, and like how they like
Mm.
coexist with each other, their form and their function. So that's your first
Right.
principle. My first
Hmm.
principle, because I think a lot about physics, is like how the atoms and the molecules, like how do they interact. Somebody who studied economics, for them that will be like their this thing, like how does this affect the
Hmm.
humans, how do humans interact with each other. So it's like
Yeah.
ultimately like we reduced based on the central stock of knowledge that we have.
Mm. And okay, I don't. That's a very fascinating way of how we perceive the world differently based off of what we've studied and how that builds on our mental models.